Well, hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me here today, where it's all about the sewing and the knitting. Occasional forays into history, fashion history, literature, but heavy on the vintage inspired sewing and knitting. Now, today I wanted to talk to you about my current plans. They're things that I've had in my brain for quite a few winters, and some are things that I've already made, but I need more of, and just ideas that are all bubbling away. And then I saw this picture from O Pioneers where she'd got sort of like a fair odd little tank top over a floral PussyBow blouse, you know, that huge bow, and a floral skirt, and I just thought, yeah, that's where my brain is going. Now, I've got various knitwear on the go. I've got a putty coloured jumper that I'm knitting and a cream cardigan. So I thought, let's put a third knit in with this. I mean, I tell a lie because there are other knits going on too, but yeah, the ones that I'm really focusing on are the three, and I alternate because I just don't want to look at the same pattern every evening when I sit down to knit. But the first one, rather than doing a Fair Isle, I do want to do a Fair Isle little tank as well. In a collection of 1940s patterns, I've got this really lovely little tank, and if I bring it a bit closer, if you see round here, it comes down into a square on the arm side. That's all moss stitch at the neck and moss stitch at the back, at the bottom. And I think it's such a beautiful little tank. So even though I want to do a Fair Isle one in the future, does it matter how many tank tops I have? They're going to be extra warmth and really, really lovely. Now, when we were out and about the other week, I saw this wool. It's Starcraft, and I so rarely would knit, you know, in a man-made. I do, as you know, love my drops yarn, but this colour is called raspberry. I mean, raspberries aren't really this colour, but the colour is so beautiful. I doubt it will show up because of how the autumnal light is, but I've already started work on it, and see that lovely moss stitch. I do love a moss stitch. So I've already started working on it using these lovely Sirdar needles I was given by a friend. They're just beautiful little mushrooms at the end. So I'm working on that. And then I was looking through my vintage patterns for a PussyBow blouse that I really wanted to work with. And I mean, I've got quite a few, but I settled on this pattern. It's woman, and you see the PussyBow blouse here, and it buttons down, but it's like more of a midi blouse. There's no shaping on it. It's just straight up and down. It has got a bust dart, but there's no waist shaping. So I'm going to be working on that one. And I picked this fabric. I think I've shown you these before, but I decided this lovely vintage fabric was the perfect one to make my PussyBow blouse with. And I think they go really nicely together. So happy with that. And then, as I've mentioned in my Rebecca Recreate the Look and the Helen Recreate the Look, the 1940s home front overalls from Wearing History that I turn into side button trousers. And in the summer at like a fabric shop closing down sale, I got this beautiful wool. It's sort of maroony, sort of flecked, well, sort of plummy flecked wool. And it picks out, if you see close in here, I've got lots of those sort of colours in here, and I think they look beautiful together. So the trousers and the blouse, plus I know that these colours will mix and match with so many other things in my wardrobe. I've got a lovely sky blue cardigan that would go over the top of these two, and the cream, so I know they're going to work. I will only use colours that I know, you know, can work really well, so that I can mix and match everything really easily. So at the moment, the focus is on the knitwear. I want to work on this for a blouse. The trousers, I'll have no problem just cutting those out and getting on with those. I do need to get some plummy buttons for the side button stand. And obviously, I've got to get on with my knitting, but I haven't got to do sleeves, so it should be a little bit quicker. This woman pattern from the 60s, I mean, it's just beautiful artwork on it, isn't it? And the pattern is bust size 38. And when I looked at the back, the waist is 31. Now I need 32 and a half. So I'm going to add a little bit extra to the side seam so that the waist will fit me, because they're the body measurements. I need to measure the pattern to see what the finished measurement will be and see how much more I need for my waist, just to make sure it all fits. But I know that the top half will fit me really well. Now this is one of those vintage patterns, you know, as in most vintage patterns, they only come in one size. So it's best to go by your bust size or your high bust measurement and then grade down or grade up accordingly. Waist and hips is always easier to just grade out there, but you want to know that it's fitting you on the top half really, really well. So I always pick around the 36 to 38 size range, but you know, you can just go up one size, it's not too terrible, or down one size. As I said, they only come in one size, and these ones are all on plain tissue, you can see here. So no markings at all. They have, this one's got lines to show you it goes on the fold, and then they will have lots of little holes that you'd mark for the grain line and the darts and everything. So I always trace these off because one, I don't want to ruin my master pattern. Even with modern patterns, I tell all my students, please trace them off because you're going to be doing some fitting alterations and you don't want to ruin your pattern. You know, you haven't got something to refer back to. With vintage, there's obviously that, but add to that the fact that they've lasted all this time, you know, and what's the likelihood you're going to find this same pattern again? So always trace the patterns, and then you can mark in the pattern notations that you understand. Rather than 2 dots for a grain line, you can draw the grain line arrow, you can draw the dart in. It will be a pattern that you more easily recognise. Now in this one, it comes with 2 lovely sheets, and this one is the Woman Success course. There's 2 sheets, as I said, and the first sheet is the Woman Success course. Is that showing up for you? And it's got so many handy tips for lots of different seam finishes. On the back here, can you see, for working bound buttonholes and how to add bias binding to the hem. And look how one of the ways that they'd finish a seam in the past, if I show this to you there, can you see? By cutting it and then they whip stitched over the edges. I don't think anyone today would have enough patience for that. But yeah, you've got your sort of little sewing guide to show you what to do. And don't assume all patterns have a 5/8 of an inch, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. On this one it says 1/2 inch turnings allowed on all seams, so it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that's really important, otherwise it wouldn't fit if I sewed the seam allowance incorrectly. And then these are all the instructions that you get, so you don't get loads, and you've got your lay plans on the back. I always ignore lay plans because I know how I've got to lay patterns down and I want to get the most out of my fabric. I'm not going to be doing any sewing today, but I will be sharing my progress with this PussyBow blouse with you. I'm going to make a toile and check any fittings, so I'm going to add that onto this video once I've done that as well, but it won't be today. It'll be another day, so I'll just bring it all together into one chat for you so you can see it all as it goes along. I'm going to show you how I trace off the vintage pattern, but also putting in length and shorter lines because they won't be there, and I know the sleeves are going to be way too short for me, but you might find they're too long on a pattern for you. Now I've already begun to trace out my pattern, and what I use for tracing out my patterns is this non-iron Vilene. I find it's far better than using tissue paper. It's nice and durable, it doesn't rip, but it's also malleable, so you could even just sort of bend it over you to see how, you know, your pattern's working, just to check that things are going to fit, because it acts like fabric too. And it's really easy just to sew it together if you want wider pieces, but it's also really cheap. I mean, I buy 2 meters of this for £1, so it's really, really cheap. Whereas things like Swedish tracing paper, which are lovely, they're far, far more expensive. So yeah, that's the one that I always recommend to all my students. Got the pattern there and the fabric that we're looking at. So I've already traced out the cuff here. And the back facing, so I've noted and I've reminded myself what the seam allowances are on here so that I don't forget. Now with the sleeve, I mean, I'm not showing you the actual pattern on the top, but I've traced out the sleeve, and the grain line is just 2 big holes here, so that's where you know to join your grain line. If you see here at the bottom, can you see these 3 dots here? And I'll show you on the pattern what they are. If I go to the instructions, it tells me that these 3 dots here are to do with the placket, so they are the stitching lines. So I can just draw lines to join those up. So they might look like random dots and you think, whatever are they there for? But once you join them up, you start to recognise what the shapes are. So this is where I would put that placket over the top there, and then that's my stitching line for the placket. I've got to trace out the necktie and the back bodice piece, but this bit I just want to show you with the front how I've just pinned this extra bit of filing on here, but I will sew this in place, so that's how I just make it wide enough. Now here for the darts, there was a dot here, a dot here and a dot here, so like I did with the placket, I've just joined those dots up, and then I've got the dart in place and my grain line. And this is my centre front fold here, this dot here, and there's little triangles for the buttons, but I never use the button marking suggestion because I need mine in a different place, so I always ignore that. I said I was going to show you how to do the length and shorten lines, didn't I? This is the sleeve and the bottom of the sleeve here. Now this sleeve doesn't come in at an angle, so it's going to be really easy to put our length and shorten line in because it's, you know, this equal distance all the way along. But if it was a sleeve that came at an angle, you want to, let's just draw up here on this bit. If your sleeve comes in at an angle like so, this is your sleeve head up here, then you want to, that's your grain line, you want to be doing your length and shorten line where it's fairly consistent with the width, not where it's starting to narrow in, because it should always sort of come sort of mid forearm, you know, mid upper arm, same on your legs, you know, between your knee and your ankle, hip and knee, and on your body, just below your bust or just above. You know, it's got to come at places where your body is quite balanced size wise. But here I can just put my length and shorten marks in wherever I want, and I want it to be at a 90-degree angle to the grain line, so I'm just drawing, that's my length and shorten line along my sleeve here. Then I'll show you how to do it on the bodice also. On the front bodice I've got my grain line here, so I'm going to now put this curves in at the waist here, so I want to know that I'm not going as it comes out, so I'm going to come at this point here. This is quite a regular part of the pattern here, so I will draw my length and shorten line in there. Very rarely do I need to lengthen that part. It's generally the upper part that isn't long enough for me. I'm very long in my upper body, so I'm going to extend that grain line up, so I've got that to work against, and I'm going to put in a length and shorten line in up here, and I'm doing it again looking for a balanced part of the pattern before the arm side starts to curve. 90-degree angle to that point. I might not need to lengthen and shorten it, but I just want to know these are on my pattern, all ready to use if I need to lengthen and shorten it. And then I transfer these same length and shorten lines to my back piece when I've traced that out. So the next thing I need to do is to get all these cut out and start working on my toile. And then I'll be back to show you how I'm getting on with that and any adjustments I need to make for my PussyBow blouse. All my PussyBow blouse pieces traced out. I didn't have to do any alterations to the back, but if you see the front, I've moved the bust dart down, and I do show you how to do that in one of my chats. I'll have to find which video that is, but the bust dart had to move down by this much, and at the shoulders I took them in. I think I took about 2 inches off. I always find shoulders are far too wide for me, so I took the front and back shoulders off. So I brought them in, so I tell a lie, I did have to alter the back slightly as well at the shoulder. Now for the sleeve, I've lengthened it by 4 inches, and rather than having a deep cuff, you'll see what I've chosen to do when we get to the finished blouse, because I'm rather deep cuff, I've done a really narrow band. Anyway, so I've lengthened it by 4 inches, and then I raised the sleeve head. So under here you can see the original sleeve head comes to here, and I raised it, I think this is about 2.5, 3 inches. I wanted some gathering, at the sleeve head, so it's nice and poofy. So I've done some alterations. Next I've got to make the toile, check how it all fits and see if there's any alterations to do. I've made the toile out of a lovely old duvet cover, and you can see the sleeve head here, it's all gathered in, and it fits me really nicely across the shoulders. You really need to get this right so that it's just on the clavicle, and then the end clavicle, I think, I can't remember what it's called, begins with an A, but it's the bone at the end of your clavicle. It's just past where your bra strap sits nicely, and then you've got full movement with the sleeve. I see so many sleeves fitted in badly. It's a real bugbear in my sewing school classes, trying to get that to work. So I'll just show you the full length. I've got the bust darts in the right place, pointing towards my bust apex here. I'm really happy with the fit. It's not a really fitted blouse. There's no waist darts and darts at the back, so length of the sleeve is just right, and the hangs, so I know I can get on and cut out my fabric, the fabric that I showed you at the beginning, and get on with sewing the blouse. Now this is a little bit of a cheat. I've already made the blouse because this is sort of filmed all back to back, so I'm not showing you the process, but I will show you through what I've done with the blouse, and I'm going to pop it on so you can see what it looks like. I'm really pleased with it. So she's hanging here, so here she is, and I've French seamed it throughout. And what I was saying to you about the cuffs, I've chosen to do little narrow cuffs, and they'll button up, and these beautiful glass buttons I found in my stash, they seemed the perfect ones to go with this blouse. So I think I should pop her on and you can see what she looks like. I'm really pleased with her. I was going to say chuffed, but I am chuffed, and I am pleased. There's quite a few things I'm really pleased about with this pattern. One, that I already know what the adjustments are I need to do to the initial pattern to then make my toile, and I had to do no fitting adjustments to the toile, so that was brilliant. It meant I could just get on with making it, and then the moment that I put it on, I absolutely loved it. I'm so pleased with it. I think it's going to look really lovely with the little tank top under and the bow over the top, and I just love how I've done these little extra poofed shoulders and how they sit in. Oh, and of course the little blue buttons, they really make it. So what do you think compared to the illustration there and my blouse? Can you see them both if I step back? Now the sleeves are lightly gathered into the cuff, so you can see them there, and then there's a little slit where that opens up, and the blue buttons, so they're slightly gathered. They're not a bishop sleeve, they're just a slightly wider sleeve with a gather at the bottom. Yeah, so this is my PussyBow blouse from, I think this is a 1960s pattern from Woman, so I'm presuming this came free with a Woman magazine that was very popular at the time. My mum used to read Woman magazine. I've got so many other things on the go that I can't wait to show you. They're nearly finished, and some other things that I want to chat with you about. So yeah, there's always more to come because the creativity doesn't stop, whatever life is throwing at me. So that's the PussyBow blouse. Don't be afraid of using vintage patterns. They're absolutely brilliant. So thank you for joining me today. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to share my sewing, knitting and making news with you. Until I see you again very soon, I shall say goodbye for now. Bye bye, see you soon.